exactly the same. Your brain is wired to interpret negative outcomes. And that's the definition I give to fear, is simply the expectation of bad.
Welcome to the Value Factory Podcast, brought to you by One Accord. We're all about helping businesses thrive and grow through leadership, strategy, and meaningful impact. Now, whether you're a seasoned executive or just starting out, our goal is to provide insights and inspiration to help you navigate your journey. Thanks for tuning in.
All right, here we are, the Value Factory. My guest today, JR Covey, a consultant with One Accord, the creator of narrative-powered success, aka narrative-powered sales and narrative-powered a lot of things. We're going to get into that. Our conversation today is going to cover a wide range of topics, but I really want to narrow in on the stories that we tell ourselves and what the narrative is in our lives and kind of how we address that. So JR, thanks for being here. Thanks for spending time. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Oh, I'd love to. And I want to thank you for making the time and giving me the opportunity to come and be a part of speaking to the Value Factory audience. That's a great blessing and a pleasure for me to be here. The program Narrative Powered Success has been developed originally for sales. I had 15 years in sales, told myself every wrong story you can tell yourself. In the process of learning what not to do, I stumbled across some things that work.
Understood. In your history of sales, what have you sold?
You name it. I have done B2B, B2C. I've done hardcore one-call close sales. I've done 6, 10, 12-month sales cycles. I've tried all of them. I love sales. I love the art of sales. I love the practice of sales. I love being able to help people come to the conclusion that's going to benefit them.
When you say people come to the conclusion, you're saying the buyer,
Exactly.
the customer? Yeah.
People coming are looking to solve a problem. They need a solution. And oftentimes they don't even know what questions to ask. So being able to ask the right questions, understand where people are coming from, what they need, what they like and don't like, it's part of the art form of helping people understand where they're trying to get to and how they can get there.
Every now and again, I'll just pause. That allows the editor time. Let's see our positioning on camera. Focus is good. All right.
I'm doing the same thing. I'm leaving a break
Yeah.
on purpose with you.
Caught that. It's good. All right. So shifting from some of your experience being in sales to now your experience consulting in sales, what are some of the things that you're hearing from the marketplace? What are some of those problems that your customers are coming to you to solve?
That's a great question. And it's helping people come to the understanding of the stories that they tell themselves without question. It's those narratives that they've come to believe are concrete reality. It must be this way, in this situation, with this type of person. That's how it's going to end.
Okay. Let's get an example of that. What does that look like?
Well, in sales, because that was my wheelhouse for so many years, as a sales professional, you can tell yourself how much you hate dealing with gatekeepers, how awkward it is to ask for the close, the fear of trying to upsell or cross-sell because you don't want to lose that original deal. And you can steal your motivation, enthusiasm, and productivity before your feet hit the ground in the morning if you're telling yourself the wrong stories.
All right. So when I was in banking, there was a season when I was responsible for a team that would serve commercial businesses on the what we call deposit side of the house. So my team would sell deposit products, and these would be credit card processing, payments, online wires, ACH for direct deposit, all this stuff. We'd go to the loan officers and say, hey, let's talk to your client that you just closed a loan for, because we've got all these other products and services that we can help this company with. And the loan officers would not let us in. Why?
The problem is the loan officer was afraid of losing control, losing their deal, losing what they had the ability to manipulate and manufacture, and they weren't seeing what they were doing as being counterproductive to the team effort. And not only that, but even to the goals and objectives of the client. And when you stand in the way of what's in the best interest of your client because you're afraid of losing control, you're not serving yourself, your company, or the client. It's fear.
Now, fear comes from often a good place, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Fear in and of itself is not negative. And I want to say that again so that it sinks in. Fear in and of itself is not bad, evil, wrong. When you want a fear response to kick in, you want it to kick in.
Yeah.
If you're being chased by a dog, you need increased oxygenation to your blood flow. You want your fast twitch muscle reflexes to kick in. You want your pupils to dilate. You want to be able to respond to a fear-inducing experience appropriately. You just don't want that to happen because your boss called a meeting you didn't expect, or your in-laws are in town.
All right. So the brain science to this, I've heard it referred to as flipping your lid, and you know more about this than I do. You're the brain guy. The amygdala,
yes.
Is that what
yes.
triggers a response?
Yes. So your amygdala is going to engage when it feels necessary. And what's necessary for you is different for what's necessary for other people. Your brain will take all of the information it's been given, experiences you've had, things you've witnessed, and even stories you've heard from others. And it's going to associate whatever that group of recipe of ingredients is, and it's going to engage when it thinks it's necessary. So what we want to help people do is recognize this is not an appropriate time for me to be going into a fear response. What are the stories I'm telling myself to convince myself this is a problem? And then how do we write a new narrative? Because the example I always use is being bitten by a dog. If you get bitten by a dog and that's your only experience, then 100% of your dog experience is traumatic. If you have 99 more experiences and you're not bitten by a dog, the amygdala will recognize we should see that as an outlier, not as the expectation.
So I'm the loan officer in a bank. Number one, I have to generate a certain number of new dollars in loan production. It's the same thing anywhere in financial services, or if I'm in real estate, I have to sell X number of houses to make the commissions. If I'm in mortgage, I have to sell, if I'm in car sales, everybody's got some quota to meet their lifestyle.
For sure.
So if I'm the loan officer, I've got to do a certain volume of loan production. What is it that could be triggering those responses? Like I've got in-laws coming for dinner and my heart starts racing, or I'm, what could trigger that fear response for me?
So it's a story that you've told yourself that this set of criteria has now been met, and the amygdala says time to turn on for self-preservation's sake. So in a decade of dealing with fear and anxiety disorders and helping people through this process, the only way to know what that story is for that person to get involved in metacognition, self-reflection, the process of thinking about your thinking. Because in hundreds of clients we've taught all over Eastern Europe and here in the States, across cultures, socioeconomic backgrounds, everybody's writing a story. That's the way your brain works to process, and it's supposed to work that way to look for danger. That's healthy and a normal use of brain function. You just don't want it to get in the way.
So if I'm listening, because I'm in this with you, and I'm sold. I understand. I don't understand, but I think I understand, right? I'm a believer in the philosophy that you're bringing forward here. If I'm listening to this though from kind of a new perspective, I'm hearing words like I think you said fear disorder. And then metacognition, like some of these words, and I'm like, yeah, but we're talking about sales here, like,
right.
And the example of the chased by a dog, it's like, yeah, but we're talking about sales. Is it really the same?
It's exactly the same. Your brain is wired to interpret negative outcomes. And that's the definition I give to fear, is simply the expectation of bad.
I'm going to sit with that one, the expectation of bad. So if I introduce someone else to my client and they make a mistake, that's an expectation of bad.
Yeah.
It's risk. I don't want to do that.
Right.
If I add someone into the mix that complicates it and I miss a closing deadline, if my client gets frustrated, there's all kinds of expectations of bad. Okay, so then you use the language, the stories that we tell.
Mm-hmm.
And here again, I'm a believer in this. I say it to myself and publicly, the stories that we tell ourselves. But on some level, I worry that minimizes it, or it makes it out to be like a caricature of reality, that, storytelling is like fairy tales and picture books for kids. So what is meant by the stories that we tell ourselves, like actually?
So it's important to recognize that at no point, and we might get a little scientific and it might seem a little silly, but there's a point. At no point does any human being ever experience reality in time. We are always seeing light ricochet off the room around us, come to our pupil. Our brain is deciphering colors and shapes, making meaning all the time in every experience. We are always nanoseconds behind reality, trying to interpret it. Does that make sense?
I'm tracking.
Okay.
Yeah.
We never, or very rarely, deal with a true understanding of all of the dynamics at play in a situation. So, for example, there was a great story where my wife had seen a friend of hers in a busy setting, and that person walked right by, didn't say hi. And she thought, man, I wonder why she's mad at me. I wonder why she didn't say hi. And then fast forward 1 week, in a very similar setting, my wife walked right past one of her other friends. And that friend confronted her and said, hey, did I do something to offend you? And she said, no, not at all. Why would you ask? She said, well, you walked right by me and you didn't say anything. You didn't even say hi or acknowledge me. She said, I'm so sorry. I was in a hurry. I had to be somewhere. I was doing something. And the light bulb went on for her. And she said, I bet that's exactly what happened last week when my other friend walked by me. We're interpreting what other people do, what other people say, based on a small fraction of the information. Now, I find it easy to have a ton of patience with servers. When I was a kid, I grew up working in restaurants. So I love having a server who's frustrated, because I can do so much to make their day easier. Like a frustrated server is the easiest person to make happy when you just compliment them, understand where they're coming from. It is such a breath of fresh air, because I've been in that place. It's easy for me to interpret what they're going through as, this server isn't mad at me. I haven't done anything wrong. There's a table over there where the kids are going crazy. The last group tipped nothing. There's people making a mess, sending their food back over and over. There's a million other parts to the story that I can't possibly know. But what I can know is the story I tell myself as an experience of either having my toes stepped on or my shins kicked. It hurts either way, but I feel very different if I feel like someone stepped on my toes and said, oh, I'm sorry, than if I feel like somebody ran up, kicked my shins, and ran away. The only difference is in how I interpret and process the information coming in. It can hurt just as much, but I can walk away very different.
AKA the stories that we tell ourselves. Your example of engaging with a server in a restaurant, I think, helps me build a bridge really quickly to the efficacy of storytelling, narrative powered success in sales.
Yeah.
So I just imagined, as you were telling that story, I imagined watching you engage with a server and complimenting this person on their day, and then how they might lighten up and how they might bring an extra, side dish, or, fill up your coffee faster. They're going to respond. In sales, if a salesperson, if a customer success representative, if an account manager, an account executive approaches the interaction with the right framework, the right narratives, what's the implication on that sales conversation?
Oh, it's dramatic. So there's really three key types of stories for sales that we want to hone in on. There's the company expectations. And these are the stories that I tell myself about me as the sales rep and the company that I'm representing. There's a set of expectations that I have of myself and my company, and those can be good or bad. There's the commodity assumptions that I'm making about the product or service that I'm selling. I can be telling myself how good and effective it is, or I could be telling myself that it's probably not going to work in this case. And then there's the customer stories that we're telling. I could tell myself before I go into every single interaction, they hate people who do what I do. I was in credit card processing for a while. You have no idea how many doors get slammed in the face of credit card processors who are knocking on doors, trying to talk to a busy business owner who's just trying to conduct their business and keep up with orders. And then they have that person come and knock on their door. They don't really want to talk to you most of the time. Yeah. They're not ready. They're not looking forward to you walking through the door. But if you're telling yourself how much they hate it, you're going to come across just downtrodden, beat up, abused, and they haven't even done anything yet.
Yeah. I mean, this goes back to some of the earliest human psychology.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just
Adler, Piaget, like foundational cornerstone aspects of psychology.
I think of Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not psychology, but
100%.
The guy did a few things that were pretty remarkable. Say again the three.
So the company,
yeah,
is the stories that I tell about myself and the company I represent.
Yeah.
The commodity is what I'm selling, product or service, and the customer or the client, who it is that I'm talking to.
What about myself?
So I'm part of the company. That okay. Me and the people that are behind me are the company stories.
So that's like the self-identity. And I remember people, when I worked for Bank of America, I remember people saying to me, I bleed Bank of America red. Like they were so passionate about believing in the company. They would point to core values. They would point to the history of the earliest, like the founder of Bank of America, this fellow named A.P. Giannini, financed the Golden Gate Bridge. Now I know this story here 20 years later because of the culture and how I would say that culture is represented in stories and artifacts.
100%.
And so the stories that were told allowed me to have a really positive story narrative with the brand that I was representing.
Yep.
Until that day that it didn't.
Yeah.
And when I couldn't tell the story of the company that I represented with integrity and excitement and positivity, I had to leave.
Yeah.
Now, I watched people stay in a company representing a brand that they didn't believe in.
Yeah.
Is there a solution for that?
So, yes, sometimes and sometimes not. But the incongruence of trying to push what you don't believe in will burn you out faster than anything else you're doing. So sometimes you can realize, you know what, I'm telling myself a story about my company or about my brand or about myself based on this experience. And when you conduct that metacognition, that thinking about your thinking, and you can pinpoint it down to, well, this happened. Because this happened, I'm making assumptions about future events that are going to correlate to that experience. Sometimes it's not fair to paint with such a broad brush. You know what? I had a bad experience. This thing didn't work. That client got dumped. This meeting didn't happen, whatever. If I see that as a systemic thing, then it's time to probably move on. But if I can drill down and go, you know what, that was probably a person having a bad day, a ball got dropped, everybody makes mistakes. It wasn't the company doing anything intentionally wrong. It just didn't work for that client. If you can find a narrative where you can maintain that congruence, no, I'm still passionate about delivering the best thing I can for my clients. And this vehicle of a company can still do that for them, then you can spin a lot of those people back as long as they don't just immediately assume this is the way it is always forever going forward.
It's easier for me to believe in a negative story than it is a positive story. I'm just realizing that in this moment.
Which is totally why the brain is wired the way it is. It's designed to assess and predict risk. That's a survival mechanism.
So I'm working for a company, something goes sideways, it crosses my values. Like this value, what do we want to say? It's whatever.
Yeah.
Goes against my values. I can imagine that I'm just easily believing that everything from here on out is going to be negative, that there's no going back from that. Is that true?
Maybe it's not. It's a case by case basis, because there are some things that are systemic, and perhaps we've walked past some red flags before we got ourselves to a place, and then it becomes aware that this isn't the right fit. But getting out of a place that isn't the right fit is the best thing you can do.
And then for the owner, for the manager, the leader, identifying when someone on their team isn't, they're no longer, they're occupying a seat, but they're not on the bus.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To then try to get production out of that person, to hold them accountable to something where they're actively telling themselves stories that go against it. That almost seems inhumane.
Yeah.
To take it to a pretty far extreme.
Yeah.
Like, JR, I know you don't believe in this thing that you're selling, but you got to hit your numbers next week.
Right.
Right. Like, maybe it's JR. Do you believe in this thing that you're selling?
Yeah.
Is this the right place? Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. So there's the me in the company. I talked about the company, but what about me? What if I'm telling myself a story that's like, I just don't have it anymore?
Or what's really common, especially in high producing individuals, is imposter syndrome. How often do we hear the talk about people dealing with imposter syndrome? I didn't deserve to get here. I'm not good enough to be here. I'm not smart enough to be here. All the people around me are better than I am. That story will take a producer to a plateau and then nosedive, because they really did have a skill, but there was a story they were telling themselves about a core intrinsic value where they couldn't align what they had accomplished, achieved, and done, and still see themselves as being less, being incapable, unintelligent. And oftentimes, unfortunately, these go back to family of origin stories. This is what your parents spoke over you, your teacher, your coach. It comes to very early stories very frequently. And when we realize, you know what, I've believed this about myself because ... that empowers us to recognize that's not the author I want to believe in. That person who told a story of my value, who I was, what I was capable of, how my potential, high or low, whatever it is, I don't want that person being the author of my story anymore. And it's so empowering to take responsibility for writing your own narrative.
I'm feeling in the moment the power, the empowerment, and it's right up against a line of like fiction, because we use the word story. Right. So at what point does the person begin to tell a story that's not true? And so if on one end of a spectrum, we've got, if over here is imposter syndrome and over here is full on hubris, right?
Delusion. Yes.
Yeah. Either I'm not good at anything or I'm the GOAT.
Yeah.
Right. Someone living in that spectrum, I generally like to believe somewhere in the middle, but towards the more positive of the thing, but you can cross a line. So you can start telling yourself a story that's like, I'm the GOAT. And a lot of times I'd say people don't like that person.
Right. That's true. But then what you've got is an individual who's telling more than just the story about themselves. They're writing a story about everybody else as being less. And that's the key differentiator between confidence and arrogance. I can be fully confident, think I'm amazing and incredible, and believe you are incredible because I know you and I've been with you. And you being incredible doesn't diminish me. Me being incredible doesn't diminish you. I have my wheelhouse. You have yours. The arrogance is when that story starts to extend to other people's value. They're not as good as me. I'm better than them. And it's in the comparison that you find toxicity. And that's all too common in sales environments where we oftentimes kind of push that competitive nature. And then you get into dynamics where people are undercutting each other and playing fast and loose with facts. And because now the motivation is, I want to be the best, not just the best I can be, but better than them. And there's a huge difference in those stories.
What do you think about stack ranking salespeople?
So my personality is one that I loved to see where I lined up. Yeah. I wanted to come. That drove me.
Yeah.
But from the experience I'm seeing in this younger generation, that might not necessarily be the best for all people across all platforms.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to realize, and one of the tools that we've developed at MPS is understanding motivation theory and thinking about what is going to get an individual to a conclusion, whether it's your customer to a buying decision or as an individual sales rep to meeting quota. What is it that's it's going to take to get to that motivation to change? Because change is uncomfortable. Change is unusual. It's not fun.
Yeah.
So you have to train yourself to lean into desiring the discomfort of change, because you know at the other end of this is growth.
Someone told me once when I was in a period of change, with change comes opportunity.
Yeah.
And tremendous. I was so not ready to hear that. It made me angry. And now I say it all the time. You've just touched on some of the tools and some of the things that you do in narrative powered success that change the outcome. Yeah. And I want to hang out on this notion of stack ranking and the competition. Isn't it true that we want competitive salespeople, that people that want to win, people that want to sell more?
Yes.
Okay.
But we want you to be hungry in the way that it's going to motivate you to change. If I bring donuts every single day and give them to the top producers, all of the people who are gluten-free are not moved by all the donuts in the world. They can be the best donuts. All of the people who aren't moved by that aren't going to be moved by that. Here's a story I was in sales and there was a spiff for a BMW 328i. It was going to go to the top performer. It was a 6-month thing with the contingency that we hit as a team total numbers.
Okay.
3.5 months in, it was me and Ken. Nobody else was going to win it. And that ended up demotivating everybody else on the team.
Yep. Because
there was no point in fighting for it. They didn't want to fight to earn us a new car. And it ended up becoming a huge failure. Nobody got the car. And everybody else got frustrated and demotivated, waiting for months to see that it was going to be one of two people and it wasn't the rest of us.
Sales incentives, I think, are some of the most difficult puzzles to figure out. And I would say that having worked on, in, and under at least a dozen sales incentive plans, because they would change every year. And every year it would be tweaked because there was a different focus or a different idea. None were perfect.
Right.
None were perfect. And most of them were, people would figure out how to game the system.
Oh, for sure. If they can, they will.
Right. And there were always consistent performers, no matter the incentive plan. So then, I have to ask, what is the purpose of those plans? I think that I can see in some cases where they do change behavior, but only for folks that are already oriented that way.
Exactly.
Okay. So how do we discover whether someone is oriented in the way of sales to be a successful, productive salesperson?
Yeah. Well, so I believe personally, anybody can be a great salesperson. Anybody can learn to do sales. It is something you learn. It is something you practice. It is just like any other art or sport. but there's nothing about it that you have to be a certain size or a certain IQ or a certain capacity to be able to succeed in it. The key is finding what is my motivation. How am I going to be good at this? And if you want to hire salespeople who end up going on and being successful, help those people figure out what their motivation is. Help them find the intrinsic motivation for success as opposed to the extrinsic. Intrinsic motivation is why I raise my kids the way I do. I love my kids. Nobody has to pay me. Nobody has to, like, they literally used to tack $100 bill on the wall. Next call dropped, gets $100. Like, I worked in a call center where we were hardcore closing every single day, smiling and dialing, walking around with headsets, pacing back and forth around each other. If you are constantly extrinsically motivated, you will only achieve to the level of that motivation's meaning to you. If you are intrinsically motivated, if you want to do this because you want to do this, there's a story written that you see the end of it. This is going to take me where I want to go, and what I'm going through, all of the hard things, all of the fun things, all of the miserable things, they're a part of the process that leads me to the end of the story I want to get to. It makes navigating all of the no's, all of the hang up on the phone, all of the rejection emails, just a part of the story. It's not personal. I don't feel bad when I get a no. I'm not diminished when somebody doesn't need what I have. I'd much rather just move on. I don't want to waste my time or their time trying to sell somebody something when it's not what either of us really need or want.
You've used the word motivation a couple times, and I think of discipline in place of motivation. But discipline has, people make a lot of different meanings out of that word, right? So to define discipline in this context, it's just doing the things that need to get done in the absence of motivation, making the calls that need to be made even when I don't feel like it, sticking to the sales script because I know that the sales script works, even though I want to add my own flair to it, like staying the course. What are the narrative? What are the stories that allow someone to maintain discipline? And maybe what are the stories that inspire us to go off course?
I think one of the quickest ways to fail is to interpret things personally. I want to say that one for the camera. One of the quickest ways to fail is to interpret things personally. Someone saying, no, I'm not interested in what you're offering, does not mean Nick is a bad person. Nick is not smart enough to sell me. Nick is not good enough. He doesn't deserve what I have. But if what you say is a rejection of my offer becomes a rejection of me, that hurts. That feels like you hate me. That feels like I'm bad. And the emotions will kick in. The higher order thinking skills will shut off. And we will become reactionary to what's happening instead of being able to respond. So one of the greatest keys is just stop taking everything personal. A no is not about you.
I'm going to need to work on some narratives for that. So let's get into the weeds on the work. How do you help someone do just what you said, not take things personally? Like, what do you actually do to help me not believe that someone saying no to my offer is a rejection of me personally?
Right. So it's oftentimes we'll literally sit down and write it out because there's so much clarity in getting something out of your head and onto ink on paper in front of you that oftentimes we'll tell a story that sounds completely rational and reasonable. I mean, have you ever had this experience where you're like, now that I'm saying this out loud, it sounds, and we've all done that. When you put it out in front of you and you expose it and you give it the ability to be validated or rejected as a narrative, then oftentimes you'll realize, man, that story that I said, that doesn't even make sense for me to take it personally. That's completely irrational for me to see. Like when I was credit card processing, they're busy. They've got a bunch of customers in there. You're walking into the store and you're trying to get their attention and they don't want to give you their attention. It's because they're giving their attention to the customers who are paying them. And that is good and reasonable and right. They're not rejecting you as an individual. They're servicing their customers like they're supposed to as a responsible business owner. So finding ways to interpret what happens as not being personal is just as easy as the story that I gave when the server comes to serve you as a customer at the restaurant and they're frustrated. It's not about me.
And you acknowledged earlier in credit card sales, when you show up, the business owner doesn't necessarily, like, they didn't call you, they didn't ask you to come in.
Right.
So you are imposing, and you know that not every one of them is interested. So there might be a no there.
Mm-hmm.
So writing out, I mean, just even the practice of thinking about, talking about, journaling through these things.
Totally.
What do you see in someone who has gone through the process and how they either plan for or respond to these situations?
So it comes with practice. And I'll tie this back to something you said earlier where you were talking about it feeling like fiction. Because to be honest, when you start rewriting your narrative, it will feel like you are lying to yourself. Because it's been so normal, so natural to tell yourself a different story that you're going to feel like you're being dishonest. When you say to yourself, no, you know what, that really wasn't about me, that broken record is going to go, yes, it was, yes, it was, yes, it was. And you pause, and then you add to the story context that makes more sense than the judgment of yourself. You know, it makes way more sense if I was in that person's shoes. If I was standing in front of all of those customers, I can see how I'm probably not in that moment ready to sit down and talk to somebody. When somebody says no when you're doing credit card processing, you walk in, no, I'm not interested. They could be very much just saying no to the traumatic experience that it was to switch credit card processors last time, which has nothing to do with you. You might have better service, better pricing, better everything. And the no that you're getting has to do with how much they hated switching credit card processors. You're innocent. You're off the hook. The thing they hate, the thing they don't want to do. Now you can spend all day long trying to fight that person. No, it's not going to be that way. You're way better off understanding that person. I know how horrible switching credit card processors is. I understand how difficult and painful this process can be. But let me help you understand. There's a value that far exceeds the work and effort involved. And if you're willing to give me 30 seconds, if you're willing to just sit down at your convenience, if you're willing to set a time on the calendar right now where we can do this, I'll help you understand.
So the disciplined person, this is my language, but the post-narrative training person, what I'm hearing you say takes themselves out of the no,
exactly,
out of the rejection, stays focused on what is the value, and continues to push forward until there's actually a no thank you.
Yeah.
Right. No, I'm not interested. But when the prospect says back to me, I don't know, I'm not sure, I had a bad experience, that's not a no.
Right.
But sometimes we tell ourselves that's a no. So then if I'm telling a different story, it is, okay, I see you in this. It's not about me.
Yeah.
You had some other experience. There's something else there. Let's try to solve for that and stay in that conversation through the end.
Yeah. Engage as long as somebody will engage with you.
Mm-hmm.
I literally almost as the customer, walked out on an experience this last week because I felt like it was dishonest and the guy continued to engage. I was walking out the front door and he kept talking to me and spun me back around. Because he continued to engage. He wasn't confrontational. I was the one that was really frustrated. So sorry to hear that. I wish that wasn't your experience. And he did it enough, and he was patient with me, even though I was frustrated. Yeah. I turned around and walked back, and we had a discussion.
So as a just my experience in life. I was going to lead with as a business owner, but this was way before. I can remember being frustrated many times at a vendor or a salesperson, particularly it's like the small business owner that doesn't take that doesn't close the sale, that doesn't take the buying cues. And so it's like this. I have a broken furnace, and I'm talking to a friend of mine that's got an HVAC company. I'm like, yeah, my furnace isn't working. My expectation of him is to say, cool, I'll fix that. I'll come over on Saturday, or, whenever it is, not drop everything, but I'll just fix that because that's what I do. And then I'll send you a bill. Like, I'm ready for that. But he doesn't do it because maybe he's telling himself the story like, oh, this is a friend. I don't want to do that. I can't sell my friend. Like, and actually as the buyer, then I start telling myself stories when people aren't going for the close. Yeah. We could take this, in a lot of directions.
It's very deep. Yes.
In fact, because narrative powered sales expanded into narrative powered success.
Absolutely.
So these ideas don't just apply to salespeople.
Right.
Whom else does this framework apply to?
I'm glad you asked. There's tools for human resources, customer service, product development. There's not a team in an organization that is not impacted in a dynamic way by the stories that all of the individuals within that team are telling themselves about each other and about the products that they're trying to deliver. Any team that becomes self-aware enough to realize, I'm judging this person's intentions. I said they did this because, that's an assumption I'm making. There's way more context to why they did it. Their boss might be breathing down their neck about a thing. And so they're coming at me in a way that might not be the best, but it's really not about me. It's about the pressure they're under. And so bringing that self-awareness and that team awareness will literally benefit anyone. There's nobody that becomes worse off by becoming self-aware.
Is self-awareness on the other side of changing the narrative?
So it's an aspect of metacognition. It is the result of when you assess the stories you're telling yourself, you're thinking about your thinking, you begin to realize this is the picture that I have written about myself, about how the world is going to perceive me when I show up, about how people are going to interpret why I'm doing what I'm doing, the assumptions I'm making about why they're doing what they're doing.
And this is metacognition. So
exactly.
You've said this big word a couple of times, and you've described it as thinking about your thinking.
Yes.
How does someone think about their thinking?
So we could get deep into the psychology. There's aspects of psychology that, for example, there's a concept called a schema. And that is, in my brain, when a word is said, it will spider out into all of the things that are associated to that word. And it's going to be different for different people. So if I say the word summer and just let it sit, you might say beach, sand, waves. Somebody else hearing that might think hiking, mountain climbing. Someone else might think golfing, horseback riding. You have your own schema. And that's what makes what we do so personal, because your associations, literally the neuron connections that your brain is making to these different things, people, places, concepts, completely based on your life experience. And I can't predict that and interpret that. I can just help you become aware of that.
You as like
the client.
Okay. You can't help. Okay, say that.
So I can't tell you what your schema is.
I'm the client, you're the salesperson, or whomever it is.
Yeah.
You can't tell me what my schema is.
Right.
Right.
So you have a set of things that are associated to that idea, that word, whatever that is.
Do you need to know what my schema
Not at all.
are? Okay.
No. This is the self-awareness aspect.
Gotcha.
I have things that I associate to summer, and the things that I associate is different from the things you associate.
Yeah.
Then there's another concept called heuristics, which those are mental shortcuts that we use to reduce cognitive strain. I will tell myself assumptions about people, places, things, groups. I associate certain areas may be more dangerous. Certain areas might be more fun. I'm gonna have these mental shortcuts so that I don't have to assess all of the individual aspects every time I go into a setting. So for everybody, home is going to have a certain set of things. Like when I go home, I can feel relaxed. I can put my feet up. I don't have to worry about things. There's things that I don't have to, every single time I come home, wonder, is home a safe place? Am I okay? But for other people, especially if your childhood home was a traumatic place and you spent your entire childhood trying to find any excuse to get out of home, for you, you have a very different association of what home is. And so helping people start to recognize what are the thoughts and the beliefs that I have about people, places, things, and settings, that is the background and the framework for the stories I'm going to tell myself.
Do I need to understand your schema and your heuristics?
Not unless you're consulting me.
Okay. But I need to understand my own.
Right.
What is it about those things that I need to understand?
The more aware I become of, I've told myself this about myself, I believe that I'm never going to be as good as ... So, for example, personal story. I grew up in the shadow of an older brother that I thought was perfect. He was good looking, he was athletic, musically inclined, funny, successful, homecoming king, captain of the basketball team. Like, he was everybody's favorite guy. My father used a specific child rearing technique that was, if you got an A, it wasn't an A plus. My brother, being the firstborn, took that message and ran with it, became hyper successful. He had nothing to compare it against. My dad used the exact same parenting technique with me, but I now had something to reflect against. I now had a standard that was way higher than I was ever going to meet. So I told myself, until I was in my mid-20s, there's no point in really trying, because I'm never going to live up to expectations. So I just came to this self-belief that there's really no point in giving it all. Like, what's the point? I'm never going to be as good as. And it wasn't my brother anymore. He never tried to make me feel bad. He was never trying to compete against me. He was a lot older than I was. There's a 7-year gap in between. But I had made the interpretation of I wasn't going to be good enough. And then I just superimposed that lens on every experience, school, sports, whatever. Never going to be as good as, so why try?
And so understanding the story that you're telling yourself, then you get to rewrite the story.
Exactly. I'm now able to say, I don't have to be as good as him at anything.
But in rewriting the story, you're going to run up against, but I'm lying to myself.
Exactly. Yeah, you're going to have to get through that. It is literally like hacking through a jungle, creating a new path. But the good thing is, the more you do it, the easier it actually gets. It will eventually become the new default. Your brain will go to that narrative eventually, but it takes a lot of intentionality to move the needle.
And the implication in the world of sales becomes really clear if I can tell myself a different story that doesn't demoralize me in the sales conversation. In the interpersonal aspects of an operations group or an HR group inside of a company, those storytelling behaviors and practices can help the interpersonal relationship.
100%.
Right. There's probably no end to the application of these theories.
Here's a great little tool.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with those interpersonal things, it's a phenomenal sentence. The story I'm telling myself is.
Yeah.
And when you can go to somebody who's on your team, you have trust, you're both trying to build something, and you can say, I just want to have this conversation with you. I know you're probably not doing any of the things that I'm bothered by, and I'm not trying to blame you, but I'm just going on the information I have. And so based on what I see, the story I'm telling myself is this: help me understand what's actually going on. Because 95% of the time, you're missing so much context that it's just not even close to the whole story. There's so many other things going on that when you start to get more context, it can often be so much easier. Oh, you're short with me and you're pushing me because you're really stressed out. And that can actually fuel empathy. I'm so sorry your boss is coming down on you like that. Let's figure out how to move this forward. Instead of becoming confrontational, I'm angry at you for being short with me. It drives compassion. I'm so sorry that you're under that load.
I'll tell you where this shows up for me the most distinctly. I use this language in conversation with Ariana, and she'll actually use it back when we're seeking clarification. Listen, the story I'm telling, like this is how I'm making sense of this thing. The farther I am from the experience of the person, so with Ariana and I, generally, we're not too far off.
Sure.
When we get to our kids, so I start to think, well, I know what it was like to be a 14-year-old boy or a 16-year-old boy or an 18-year-old boy. Like, I went to high school. Like, I know exactly everything that you're going through in life, right? And the kids are like, Dad, like, you don't have a clue. And well, listen, this is the story that I'm telling myself. They're like, no, that's not it. Because of the schema, the heuristic, you know, and it isn't as though, I don't know, this isn't new. Like, but for me, it's like, whoa, you know, it's new. Been around since the dawn of time with generations and ages, and, you know, everyone has lived experience, and that all makes sense to me. But I just want to believe that everybody sees the world the way I see it, because that sure would make things a lot easier for everybody else, not just me, right?
Yeah.
All kidding aside, there's some, you know, very old language, right? Know thyself. This, you know, a lot of wisdom in this, but we're putting new and deeper and broader thinking, and you're bringing tools in to help, and doing it not in like a, you know, clinical psychology kind of context, but like practical application.
Right.
Here in your 9 to 5, in your daily life, daily living. Let's see how these things show up and either help or hurt what it is you're trying to do. It's cool stuff, man.
I could geek out on what I do all day, every day. I love it.
Yeah. I can see the connection that you have in with the work and with the people that you're working with. How do you deliver this? Do you do this like one-on-one? Do you do seminars?
So I love speaking. I love doing speaking engagements, going in and addressing teams. We do team coaching. We can do one-on-one coaching. We can do full development of training curriculum and programs and have it be a year-long or multi-year-long process. Like, we can help deliver whatever it is the client to the level that the client is willing to accept that change.
So I can imagine you could do a keynote, and you're delivering some of these ideas. Now, I don't know how long we've been talking, 30 or 45 minutes. There's so many things that a person could take away just from this conversation. So there's value in that for sure. I can see in one-on-one work, you've talked about tools, you know, even just having people write out their stories and process that. And you mentioned year-long or multi-year. I'm just imagining that's in a company where you're doing a lot of work with big teams, and maybe there's new people coming in over time. And so how long does it take someone to go through a program? Like, is there
So the original curriculum was a 6-week program that was done on an every other week basis. So it was really 12 weeks, because you needed to have enough time in between, because it is like drinking from a fire hose when you first start assessing what it is that I believe about all of these things and about myself and about people. And it's kind of uncomfortable, and I really have to get to the point where I can push through. And honestly, we had to build the tools about motivation to help people survive the 6 weeks. Because oftentimes, especially if you're dealing with trauma, you're dealing with long held beliefs, you're dealing with generational stories. This is the way we've always been. It's different.
Yeah. So 12 weeks
would be a minimum.
Okay. I just think about some of the experiences that I've had where I'm having personal breakthroughs in understanding myself have actually been in corporate training environments. And this is a narrative that I'm rewriting in the moment, which is work is not a place for that kind of stuff.
Right.
And yet in my own lived experience, it has been in the workplace doing things like you've just described that I've had a pretty significant personal breakthrough in understanding myself, almost to the extent where I've done a lot of work, as they say, like self-development, self-help kind of stuff, and a lot of it on my own or through ministry or through kind of weekend events and things like that, right? The men's weekend where we burn the sage and beat the drums and howl at the moon and that kind of stuff. But also some really deep emotional sit in a circle and share a story, right? But I've done a lot of that stuff in the workplace.
Yeah.
And almost feeling a sense of obligation as the steward of a company, a group of people, to create that space for folks to develop. We want to develop the next generation of leaders to take our company to that next place. These things, I'm kind of getting fired up about this right now. Awesome. Where do people learn more about you, about narrative powered success?
Well, One Accord is a phenomenal resource that has not just the tools that I've developed, but also tools of countless other people who work in production, manufacturing, distribution, legal, finance, all of the other areas of tools. I have a website that is fearproof.me because every time a person comes to my website, I want them to say, fearproof me.
I love it.
The 6-week training is on there, but also the resources to invite me to be a keynote speaker or do a talk. Within that, there's a whole new social media push that we're pushing. NPS_socials is now all of our social media platform. And we're going to be putting out every week, we're going to be putting out thought-provoking ideas and concepts just to kind of stir people up, get them thinking about the stuff that is going to take them to the next step, but they're so busy oftentimes just in the day-to-day that they're not thinking about how to take the next step. And then every couple of weeks, we'll be putting out a newsletter that'll get into the science of what's going on and some practical advice for how to make changes.
I imagine that newsletter is going to be pretty meaty.
It will, but we're keeping it down small enough so that it's digestible, because I know what it's like to drink from a fire hose, because we've been teaching this curriculum for over a decade, and you can see people's eyes just glaze over. There comes a point where they just can't receive anymore. So we're breaking it down into bite-sized chunks into these newsletters where it's something that you can think about and you can take action on.
Fearproof me.
Mm-hmm.
Fearproof.me.
Yep.
Clever. JR, thank you, man.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.